This is Eric Alvarez. One quick note before we begin. This episode is available in Spanish. You are listening to the English version, which means I'm going to try to say soccer instead of fútbol. Para escucharlo en español, busca el podcast Mi Mundialista Favorito.
On the northwestern coast of Ecuador, you'll find one of the poorest, rich cities you've ever seen. Esmeraldas has some of the highest poverty rates in Ecuador, but it also has the greatest biodiversity and some of the best soccer players the country has ever seen. One of them is
José Cifuentes!
This is how Cifu, as his fans and loved ones call him, describes life in his hometown.
Por ahí faltaban como que muchas cosas. Era algo que económicamente no podía decir te podías comprar una bicicleta o te puedes comprar unos zapatos. Era lo necesario para vivir. Recursos de los barrios como podemos decir, más pobres de Esmeralda.
That's why when Cifu decided to drop out of school before finishing middle school to pursue soccer, his mom couldn't help but be worried.
No terminó ni la primaria, entonces para ella como criarnos a nosotros que terminemos la escuela, así ella tenía que trabajar horas extra, era lo principal, en poder ayudarnos a que nosotros podamos ir por ahí.
But then, an unusual opportunity emerged, an opportunity that will allow him to follow his passion for soccer and continue his education. An opportunity he is now working to make sure dozens more have. I'm former Colombian striker Juan Pablo Ángel.
And I'm LX News host Eric Alvarez.
This is my new favorite Futbolista, where we introduce you to some of football's brightest stars and the causes they're fighting for off the pitch.
So Juan Pablo, you personally know Cifu, right?
Yes, I do. My first taste of seeing him live was at the Suramericano, CONMEBOL, in Chile. And I thought he had an incredible potential to become one of the greatest players of Ecuador. He had a dream. Obviously, he told me about all the sacrifices that he made. And you can tell, and it's very difficult to describe or to put it in words, you can tell that he was a player that was ready basically to jump and to go to the next level. And that's an ambition that I know he has since he was a kid. For the Ecuadorian soccer player, school wasn't always a priority.
Cifu, who is now one of the top goal scorers for LAFC in Los Angeles and a midfielder for Ecuador's national team, always knew his top priority was soccer.
But for his mom, Jenny, school always had to come first. Cifu and his mom didn't see eye to eye, so they had to reach a compromise.
Termino mi deberes, como y me voy corriendo a entrenar.
That agreement worked well for 5 years, but as time passed, Cifu's talent on the pitch only grew, and so did the demands of his passion. When Cifu was only 11, his soccer career reached a decisive moment. He had so much talent, people were starting to take notice. One day, he had an opportunity to enroll in a soccer academy 6 hours away from Esmeraldas, in the capital of Ecuador, Quito. Were he to stay home, he would have risked slowing down his progress and sinking his dreams of playing professional soccer. Esmeraldas simply didn't have the resources a big city offered.
En ese momento, ella, por ahí cuando ya tenía que salir, que ya a otra ciudad, no me quería salir, mi papá sí. Al final ella me decía, si es lo que quiere, anda, aunque con lágrimas de que se le vaya un hijo a temprana edad.
Cifu left and joined a football academy in Quito.
He would return to Esmeraldas a few times a year. After a few years, another opportunity arose to join an even more rigorous soccer academy, this one also far from home. Cifu's career was taking off, so he moved again. But things didn't go as planned.
Ya eran 7, 8 fechas, y yo sin jugar, y le decía, mamá, mándame para el pasaje que me voy a mi casa. Estoy aguantando hambre, estoy con ganas de jugar y no puedo. Y mamá me dijo, bueno, entonces yo te mando mañana mismo, estás acá y no vuelves a pisar una cancha nunca más en tu vida.
For Cifu, the risk of returning to Esmeraldas and never playing again was too much to bear, so he stayed.
Entonces ahí fue donde cambió todo, donde me hizo cambiar. Si me voy no vuelvo a jugar fútbol. Y cuando yo me quería ir, un amigo, Cifuentes, tranquilo, ya te va a llegar el carnet y ya vas a jugar.
As Cifu waited for his moment to shine, Ecuador's national team was going through a tough season.
Nos dieron una golpiza en fútbol, o sea, fue descomunal y yo soy muy competitivo. Entonces el entrenador que era mi amigo le dije, vamos a tener que ir a buscar chicos buenos porque si no vamos a perder todos los años.
That was Cristian Reynoso, who is now Cifu's agent. At that time, however, he didn't know Cifu. Cristian wanted to identify promising players and trade them to play for Ecuador's national team. But to convince the families of those minors, he knew he had to offer more than just a prospect.
Y recuerdo que fuimos a Universidad Católica y les dijimos, traigan todos los chicos que ustedes quieran que estudien. Nosotros vamos a dar espacio a 5. Llega un bus de 40 personas, se parquea fuera del colegio y se bajan 4.
One of those young men was Cifu.
Pero en Ecuador resulta muy complicado que los futbolistas puedan ser futbolistas y tengan un estudio de colegio.
Cristian was very well aware of that when he met Cifu for the first time.
Los futbolistas pueden decirte eso, que normalmente les decían el fútbol o el estudio, el fútbol o el estudio. No hay como los dos, y sí hay como.
In Ecuador, it's tough for a 14-year-old to go to school while he pursues elite soccer, especially if he lives in a rural area like Cifu did. Finding elite competition usually requires that a teenager move to a big city, and that move is usually to a demanding soccer academy that does not provide money or plans for a custom education. Juan Pablo, Cifu is from Ecuador, but I wanted to ask you, what is it like in Colombia, where you're from, for young players with these aspirations?
I think, Eric, there's no difference. It's a difficult path. There's a lot of kids around the country dreaming of becoming professional football players. And it's only just a small minority of them that make it. So you have to be professional. You certainly have to have talent. You have to be extremely disciplined to try to make the most of the opportunities that come to you.
So we were talking about Ecuador. Being in the rural areas makes it so much more difficult, that decision, whether I want to be a soccer player. Is it the same thing in Colombia? There's big cities and there's rural areas.
Yeah, there's always towns or cities that are well known for having the best academies or the best football teams. And those areas are the ones that probably provide to those kids that have ambition to play the sport with better opportunities. So for those kids that live in rural areas or that are far away from those cities, it becomes a lot more harder. And I think that is one of the challenges, in particular for federations, to give access to more boys and girls that have aspirations of dreams to become eventually professional football players. Those players that unfortunately don't make it is very difficult for them because a lot of them don't have the academic education. They didn't even went to school. And that obviously, when they have to face the real world, it becomes more challenging. So a lot of the players that I grew up with, they ended up, working, driving a taxi or working on a store but they didn't really have anything to fall on, and that's extremely hard. That's why in Ecuador, it's a huge gamble for kids pursuing pro soccer dreams. We have to remember that thousands of kids dream of being a pro soccer players every year and will try to do so. Only a handful will actually make it. But this is how Christian puts it.
Entonces, normalmente a partir de tantos chicos que forman parte de divisiones formativas, en lugar de generarse una formación integral de seres humanos, se genera un problema social porque tienes muchos chicos desertando del deporte sin educación.
That's why in 2018, Christian decided to do an experiment. The goal, prove that
El fútbol y el estudio sí pueden ir de la mano.
together with ADCAS, one of the strongest football clubs in Ecuador, and the private high school John Austin College, Christian started a free education project called Futbolista.
Básicamente tiene que ver con introducir a los futbolistas al estudio regular. ¿Cómo lo hacemos? Tenemos personal contratado que va a los complejos deportivos e imparte en aulas las clases. Entonces, bien sea en la mañana o en la tarde, el colegio está funcionando desde las 8 de la mañana hasta las 5:40 de la tarde.
A soccer player doesn't have the same hours in a day as a regular student who is solely dedicated to his high school degree. That's why Football Studio uses an express high school curriculum.
Nosotros hacemos adaptaciones al contenido curricular y no reciben todo el contenido académico, sino las partes importantes, condensadas. O sea, hacen un trabajo en la parte académica de la fundación impecable, espectacular, y detrás de esto no hay menos de 12 personas trabajando todos los días en la parte académica, tratando de ver alternativas, tratando de ver qué mejoramos, qué hacemos, cómo podemos seguir creciendo.
Cifu was one of the first students to pass through the program. It's still completely free for everyone who participates. One of the school's emphasis is on learning English.
El inglés no me gustaba, me salía de clase de inglés. En la escuela, en el colegio ya no, porque a ver, eres becado, si pierdes una materia de inglés te vas a tener que perder tu beca. Pero era muy difícil.
Even though school wasn't his favorite, Cifu was always very dedicated, in part because his success in soccer was tied to his academic success.
Se estaba igualando una materia con la selección sub-20. No recuerdo bien si era previo al partido con Argentina, que él hace el gol con el que ganamos a Argentina de tiro libre. O sea, una persona que tenga la capacidad de unir, que en eso está representada nuestra idea, unir la presión que significa el deporte, representar a tu país en una selección nacional, siendo el capitán, porque él fue capitán gran parte de esos partidos, y estar igualándose a una materia que muchos le restan importancia.
Even though Cifu says he never had a plan B if soccer didn't work out, he says he knew a high school diploma would only help him.
No es que todos vayan a llegar a ser futbolistas, pero van a tener la educación que se merecen, van a poder conseguir un buen trabajo en el futuro y a otros puedan tener la posibilidad y la bendición de jugar al fútbol.
But many times, even an education isn't enough to make a better life in Ecuador. In Cifu's graduating class, there were athletes who didn't make it to the national team nor to a solid job.
Uno de los que estaba en su categoría, que era un central de proyección a primera categoría, tuvo una lesión, luego no se recuperó. Hace 4 meses lo mataron porque pertenecía a una banda delictiva. Cuando el futbolista ya no vale, o sea, te convierten en una máquina fuerte, tácticamente te hacen entender los movimientos, etcétera, etcétera. Pero como ser humano no tienes herramientas. Cuando sales a la vida, al normal,
What happened to Cifu's former teammate is just heartbreaking. Ensuring young people have access to good employment is one of Ecuador's biggest priorities. The country has made great advances when it comes to elementary education in the last decade, with 95% of Ecuadorian children graduating from elementary school. But when students get older,
Esto baja un poco al 72% cuando ingresan a bachillerato y es básicamente por razones económicas, necesitan trabajar o porque no les interesa los estudios.
Montserrat Creamer served as Minister of Education in Ecuador from 2019 to 2021. We wanted to learn more about the societal obstacles Cifu faced and that Futbol Estudio is trying to tackle. So we asked her a few questions about it. We learned that in Ecuador, there is an interesting dynamic that makes providing education tricky. There are two different school curriculums, one for rural communities and another for urban ones.
50% de nuestras escuelas son escuelas rurales, pequeñas, porque nosotros tenemos 14 nacionalidades y 18 pueblos, con 14 lenguas diferentes.
And that's where the divide occurs. The pandemic only highlighted the challenges rural communities like Esmeraldas, where Cifu is from, face.
En la pandemia vimos cómo nuestros estudiantes y familias de menores recursos tenían un celular para toda la familia, papá, mamá y 4 hijos, y faltaba por supuesto muchos más dispositivos y conectividad.
That's why for many Ecuadorians, moving to a big city is a way to get closer to a better future.
Las familias migran hacia las ciudades para poder tener mayores oportunidades de empleo para ellos, como también para educación y empleo para sus hijos.
That's precisely what Cifu experienced.
En muchos de los casos, ellos han tenido que dejar su vida con su familia, con sus seres queridos, como es el caso de José Cifuentes, que él dice que disfrutaba mucho viviendo con su familia, obviamente, y sus paisajes de Esmeraldas para poder seguir un entrenamiento acompañado de estudios sólidos.
But just moving to a big city where there's more access to higher education doesn't solve the problem.
Personas desempleadas tienen títulos de universidades, de institutos técnicos y tecnológicos y eso nos preocupa.
Why is that the case?
En el país hay un problema de generación de empleo de calidad, empleo ágil, me refiero que se genere ágilmente oportunidades de empleo y de calidad, y solamente el 39% del país tiene este tipo de empleo de calidad.
So what is the solution? There's no panacea, but there are little changes that are already generating results.
Estamos dándole mucha fuerza a la educación técnica, porque sabemos que la educación técnica te prepara muy bien para una destreza, una habilidad, un oficio específico y puedes insertarte rápidamente en la vida laboral. Quisiéramos lograr lugares de entrenamiento de alto rendimiento y que nuestro currículo y nuestra formación incluya, por supuesto, el desarrollo de los deportes en los jóvenes.
Until that happens, Montserrat believes it's a big help to have high-profile Ecuadorians like Cifu speak about the importance of access to education.
Es importantísimo porque José Cifuentes es un referente, es un líder para nuestros niños y jóvenes y él va a permitir y permite con sus declaraciones, con sus goles, como aquel fabuloso gol en Polonia ante Estados Unidos en el 2019. Él mismo lo dice en sus declaraciones, él dice yo lo hago en nombre del país y uso la camiseta tricolor, que es nuestra bandera nacional, y el país entero se siente que hizo un magnífico gol. Y eso sube la autoestima nacional a nuestros niños y revierte un círculo vicioso de bajas expectativas y bajos resultados y baja autoestima.
There is a video on Facebook that shows Cifu returning to visit the football studio students and teachers at the John Austin School in Ecuador. You can see 2 rows of people on either side of Cifu, cheering him as he walks by, hugging each of them one by one.
Siempre que voy, puedo visitar es por el apoyo que me dieron, por la confianza, porque pensé que cuando por ahí no iba a poder estudiar, en el 2015 pude entrar ahí, pude entrar al proyecto.
In 2019, 4 years after starting his football studio journey, Cifu graduated with a final grade of 8.18 out of 10. Today, Cifu has established himself as one of Ecuador's strongest young players, At the 2019 U20 FIFA World Cup, he launched a rocket against the United States that was named Goal of the Tournament and one of FIFA's top 10 goals of the year. When he's not scoring goals for LAFC, Cifu visits Ecuador every chance he gets. He makes time to help other students follow in his footsteps.
Ahora yo podré ayudar con algo económicamente para que puedan becar a otro niño que tenga la condición que yo tuve antes. Saber de que un niño, una persona que se graduó ahí, ahora esté jugando en el exterior, represente al país, es algo que le motiva por ahí a un niño que tal vez los padres se hagan el esfuerzo para que ellos estudien.
On the next episode of my new favorite Futbolista.
This Canadian midfielder was raised by a single mother. Now he's providing single mothers with resources his family never had.
I think just her relentlessness to continue to find work and make sure there was food on the table and we had clothes is definitely the biggest sacrifice she made because she had to do it by herself for 3 boys.
Get to know Mark Anthony Kay on the next episode of my new favorite Futbolista.
Thank you for listening to my new favorite Futbolista. There will be over 500 players at the World Cup, so we have more inspiring stories to tell. Go back to the My New Favorite Futbolista feed right now to hear previous episodes, and make sure to subscribe to get future episodes automatically downloaded to your device. This episode of My New Favorite Futbolista was produced by LX News and Telemundo. Juan Pablo Angel and I were your hosts. Fernando Hurtado wrote this episode, and James Jeffrey edited it. Fernando Hurtado and Seth Rubinroyd were the supervising producers. Matthew Glasser served as managing editor. Jeremy Berg and Matt Goldberg served as executive producers. Tony Pierce was the motion graphics designer with support from Aaron Pinnell. Justin Covington, Brad Fossler, James Jeffrey, Joaquin Gutierrez, and Sanjesh Singh were the production crew. Stephen Dawson was the media manager and quality control editor.